Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this first round of breakout sessions. My name is Treitz. I'm founder and CEO of VMS AG. You might hear that I'm not by my mother language an English speaker. I'm German, so bear with me if I'm mistreating English sometimes a little bit. I would like to talk to you about lowering the TCO of enterprise apps, or so to say. I'm planning to talk about the most important thing here in Vegas, about money. And we'll see what we can do to give you a little bit insight in how to save some money around enterprise apps and especially SAP. So just for me to know a little bit more about you, the audience here, how many of you are in direct contact with SAP as an application? Okay, a few. Other enterprise apps like Oracle or Infor or so? Okay, so we'll split that a little bit up and we'll do also the more generic things which apply not only to SAP but also for other areas. Okay, so let's go into that. I would like to start with some recent findings. Recent findings about a study we provided for Amazon for AWS about cost of running SAP. Well, the bad thing is, I learned this morning in the keynote session that I'm already presenting you outdated data since AWS is going to lower the price for S3, which is not calculated into the figures I'm showing you today. So, but that's one of the things which are really great about AWS. We're talking about something which is really shaking the market in terms of not only the service but also the prices, and that makes things quite interesting these days. So the study we provided, just some of the findings. For SAP, it's quite important. It's a certified platform now. Certification in the SAP world is very important since a non-certified platform is not supported by SAP simply. So technically you could run SAP systems for quite a while on AWS, but as soon as a problem is coming up, SAP is telling you, well, that's not a supported platform and we don't do anything for you. So the certification is something which is very important to be sure that you really can rely on that platform from an SAP support perspective. Second thing is that Amazon did a lot in expanding the chance of what kind of SAP systems you can run. Certifications from SAP perspective came over the last couple of months. So we have been providing a first round of this study earlier this year, something like April, May time. And then we have been talking about smaller systems, SAP all-in-one, things like that. And now we are really in the area where we can tell that also large implementations can run on AWS, so it's not just the size which is limiting you here. So we have also some numbers in terms of the savings you can expect. So we see up to 94% savings on storage and server operations. So that's an impressive number. And I'm here as a kind of personal testimony for that number. The personal testimony is that yesterday morning at 5 o'clock, I got a call from the people at home that one of our large databases, which is not yet on AWS, ran out of disk space on their boot device, and that they have trouble, and we have been losing 2 days of operational for a 20 terabyte database we're desperately needing for providing services to our customers. So from that perspective, I know what I'm talking about. We have been spending a lot of time now during these 2 days with a couple of people trying to get that system up and running again, simply for the fact that we had no more disk space. And this is something which the cloud definitely provides. There is disk space. It doesn't provide a solution for each and everything. If you have not set up things carefully, you might run into a situation as we have been running into. But if you have more disk space, you can easily fix that. We couldn't easily fix it. It's not in the cloud yet. So I think 94% is something which you are really experiencing if you are not running in these kind of situations. So, oops, I'm pressing a little bit too heavily here. So 80% savings on service for large ERP systems. This is quite important as we see that also not for the small situations, smaller systems, but also for large ones. No upfront investment, you know about that. The overall 5-year TCO savings, I have two set I'm not capable to manage that here. I have two sets of figures for you here, which I will explain later on a little bit more in detail what they mean. So it's between 16 and 22% savings for the overall TCO model. The overall TCO model holds a lot of components which are all together what you have to take into calculation when running such an SAP system. So there are elements which are not influenced by AWS. One very simple thing is you need to buy SAP licenses, as you would have to buy with any other product you would like to run. So AWS is not giving you SAP licenses or any other type of licenses cheaper. So from that perspective, this is a non-influenced area of AWS. So when you take all these kind of things into consideration, then AWS gives us 16 to 22% lower cost. If you are just looking at the area where AWS makes a difference, compute capacity, storage, and a lot of other very important things I will come back to later, then we're talking about 59 to 71%. So in those areas, AWS really makes a big splash here, and it makes a difference. And what we also did is that we calculated what we call the Cloud Worthiness Index for a certain vendor. We did that for several vendors, and Amazon AWS was capable to achieve the leading position with number 59. It's in the range between 10 and 100, so it's 59 as a savings indicator. And it's the first in the list of platforms we have been checking for running SAP on. So AWS is the most price-aggressive one and the most generating the most impact on all the cost, which I will come to later when we're looking at the TCO model. So what I would like to go through with you is certain aspects of how AWS, how the cloud is impacting something like running SAP or running another enterprise application. There's something special around that, and well, one of the reasons why it's special is that all of these applications have never been made for a cloud world. So if you think of SAP, the basics of the SAP technology as you're using it today have been made in the year 88 to 92. So I was part of that. I know what we have been building in these times, and I had no idea that cloud will be around at any time later on. So from that perspective, there are certain challenges when you would like to take enterprise apps into the cloud. So we're not talking about very modern, very new things. SAP is bringing to the table like HANA. HANA is made in a different way. HANA is made for cloud environment and things like that. But talking about the typical enterprise apps you would like to run, a financial system, a controlling system, you would like to run supply chain systems, these kind of software has not been made with the cloud in mind. So we have to see how the cloud impacts that, and it's a little bit different than it would, for instance, impact something like a Netflix or whatever you have in mind there. Then I would like to go into the real cost savings potential. So what does it bring to the table here? And the next question is how to apply that to your environment. So it's nice to read in a white paper, oh, it's great savings, but how can you bring that into your environment, and does it apply in the same way? So when I'm working with SAP customers for quite a while now, and whenever I'm coming into a company, the first thing people say to me, well, it's very special here, and to a certain degree it's true. So each SAP landscape we are finding is something which is unique in a certain aspect, and the question is how can you transform what generically has been thought about here to your environment. And the last point, some real practical takeaways. So I love really to give people to give some takeaways in the end, so that it's not just thinking about something in general, but really working with that. Okay, so for the first part, I would like to use some National Institute of Standards definition. So not, since I think nobody has understood what the cloud is, but I would like to pick some very specifics out of that. So what you see here, there are nice words like you can conveniently rent something. So the convenience factor is very important. So fully featured applications, this is something we have to talk about. What is a fully featured application? If we're just looking at the services list of Amazon, an operating system, compute capacity, is something you can get by Amazon. But a fully featured application is, in that perspective, might work for somebody who is responsible for compute capacity in the company, but from the perspective of, let's say, a CFO who would like to run a financial system, compute capacity provided by AWS is nothing he can really digest. So he would like to have an FI system. So what does that mean, and how does this person get to the service? And I'll come to that. So it's, again, convenience, it's on demand, it's rapidly provisioned. So this is something we will talk about very intensively. This is very important, what you have to do to have rapidly provisioned applications. So we are not talking about the fact that AWS is capable to give you compute capacity within a minute. But does that mean that you have an application running within a minute? It's a little bit more complicated, and you have to do something for that. And the last point here, minimal management effort or service provider interaction. Even in an outsourcing world, you could increase on demand. So you could get additional compute capacity. But in an outsourcing type of world, increasing compute capacity means that first the salesperson is coming to you from your outsourcer and says, well, you're exceeding the range of what we have defined here, and here is an addendum to your contract, and if you sign that and give that to your purchasing department, and as soon as we have the order from you, then we will care about how fast we can provide some new compute capacity to you. So we are talking about weeks. We are not talking about minutes here. So, and this is what the NIST has been giving into that definition. So cloud means it's like that. And so what can we do to get that? So the question is, when we would like to have a service like a financial system, first thing is we have to define that service. We have to find a deployment model. We have to find a service model. These are all things which are the obligation of the IT department, of the application management department, of a company running an enterprise app today. So this is nothing which comes from Amazon. Amazon has not been going into the business of providing enterprise apps. It's in the business of enabling you to deliver enterprise apps. But it's not delivering the enterprise app by themselves. So you have to go into the economic considerations. I'm coming to that. Operational, service level agreements. Service level agreements are something which are quite fundamental. If you're looking at the service level agreements you have today for enterprise apps, they will be fundamentally different. So I was one of the first ones who was writing in a blog something like 2.5 years ago that I'm quite annoyed by the fact that I could not negotiate service level agreements with Amazon, as I would need that for running such a critical application as an SAP system. So what I had to learn over time is we will find new definitions of service level agreements. So it's not the old one. Yes, there will be something like response times. Yes, there will be something like availability, but not in the way that availability means the availability of a piece of hardware. It means the availability of a service. And that's a totally different thing and a totally different definition. And this is what we have to care about. So the journey takes us from the early 90s, where we have been going into something like outtasking. So outtasking meant we are not doing everything on our own, but even repetitive tasks are giving to other companies, to other people, to service provider. Then we went into outsourcing. So we transferred not only a single task, but the whole responsibility for providing an application landscape to a service provider. So that was a good idea to do that, but nevertheless, it's your environment. So in the outsourcing world, an outsourcing provider runs your environment just in another data center. So you have to think about the architecture. You have to think about what type of operating system would I have. Do I want to run in a Windows world? Do I want to run in an IBM Power-based world or whatever? It's always your decision. The service provider comes and says, well, I'm running that for you, but it's your decision what you would like to have. In the cloud, things change. So it's self-service on demand. So the second thing, it's complete resource pooling. So there's nothing which is really dedicated for you beyond the boundary of some minutes or hours where you said, I would like to run that system for me. But the great thing is the elasticity does not only work when you're growing, it also works in shrinking. That's very important. So you could easily buy even mainframes 10 years ago from IBM with a growth factor. So growth factor meant as soon as you're using more of my mainframe, you pay a little bit more, and from that moment on, you're on the next level, not only of service, but also of payment. But there was no way to get rid of something like that again. So here, even if you're just testing something for a day, or even for an hour, you can get rid of that service of AWS afterwards. And that's really important since this model has not been available for business applications before. And you pay for what you use in measured consumption and not in long-term provisioning things. So, but the next step, and this is the step which brings us into using business applications in the same way, is the step to virtual appliances. So a virtual appliance is something where you have a pre-configured app, a pre-configured application. So it's always a little bit difficult talking about an app, since an app sounds like something on an iPhone or so. Something very small, very easy to handle. We are talking about enterprise applications. We are talking about huge things with huge amounts of data and things which are business critical. But the next step for running enterprise apps in the cloud are virtual appliances. So you have pre-configured SAP systems. I would like to run a financial system with the following setup in my company right now. And then you start it up and it runs. Or you are cloning a system. So the question is, you would like to have a system for test or quality assurance with up-to-date data. So how do you do that? So the funny thing is, if you have the virtual appliance, then you say, okay, please copy that. And the copy procedure knows about all the things which have to be done. Such a copying and cloning procedure is not easy. So you have to change a lot of IP addresses, you have to change a lot of connections to other systems, feeder system, depending systems, the data warehouse. You have to avoid things like happened last year, that somebody was a large telecom provider was cloning the production ERP system, and it was all okay. The only thing they forgot was the connection to the printing system. So when they tested making new invoices and new invoice type, they sent out 200,000 invoices to real-world users. And so you know how much money that costs to collect that again and to really make the right form of appeasement there with the customers. So there are a lot of things which have to be done when you clone such a system, and this is what we mean with a virtual appliance. The virtual appliance is not only the definition of the system, but it's a definition of all the parameters when you're going to clone, to copy, to multiply that in any way, so that you can do that in minutes or at least hours, so hours when we're thinking about copying large amounts of data. So SAP did that. SAP did that for their own environment, and so they provided us with some figures here. So their setup for setting up a single ERP system typically is 5 man-days the old way. The old way means, oh, fine, here's a machine, and I have a DVD, and I put it in, and I start to install an ERP system. So 5 days, going down to half a day afterwards. So single system with content, same thing. So content means the IDA system of SAP is a complete ERP system with company data in it, so for playing around and testing that. So going down to half a day. Or a complete business scenario. So you have an ERP system, you have an industry solution on that, you have a CRM system, which is a separate instance, you have the business objects explorer, you have SCM, supply chain management, you have a portal, etc. So cloning such a thing in SAP terms takes 20 person days, and it's the same thing, it's just half a day for running that, and have a consistent copy of a complete landscape afterwards. So I took one thing here out of a newspaper, which I think is setting a little bit the tone. So where's the real world today, and where is what a vendor says, or what we would like to have? So in the newspaper it says, typically we had lead times of 13 weeks until we could provide a new SAP system. And now we are down to 4 weeks. So, well, that's progress, definitely. It's not the type of progress we would like to see. So we would like to hear from this company we are capable to do that within 4 hours. But they are not in that situation. And why am I mentioning that? It is really important that we are going to provide these kind of services within the companies, virtual appliances, all the architectural things behind, all the procedures, to really provide services so in that speed that we can match the thing here like SAP has with something like half a day. So this is what is really needed for the application people then to go forward with fast project implementation times, with better testing. So we see a lot of systems which suffer from bad testing, simple for the fact that once you have been applying a test to a certain amount of data, that data is gone and cannot be replaced. So what do people do typically? They shift with their testing in the production environment, since there is always enough real-world data. So that's not a good thing to do. So, but they cannot afford to wait another 4 weeks until a refresh of their test environment is done. So this is what we're talking about. We need to define services in the IT, how to provide SAP systems or other enterprise apps in a very fast way to the users. So, but how do we really make that cloud economics work? How can we quantify the benefits? Everybody agrees it's a great thing to have that fast and to have the cloud, and so we have endless capacity and we can shrink and grow, great. But such a positive opinion and a business case is something very different. So as soon as you're sitting in your company and say, well, I was there, Amazon reInvent, great show, great products, and we would like to go now with the SAP system to the cloud, the first question is, how does it pay? How do we calculate? And so what do you need to do that? You need a systematic approach. So you need a systematic approach to understand the total cost of ownership of such an application. You need to be able to write simply down what kind of elements are in there and what they cost. The second thing is what we did for the sake of the study. We took 4 prototypes. So the prototypes we have been using, a small all-in-one environment with ERP, CRM, BW, a small ERP system outsourced, a small ERP system in-house, and a large ERP system in-house with up to 6,000 users. So this is what you will see in the study, laid out in more detail how we can do that. And then you need a methodology how to apply that later on to the individual company. So this is where we have been defining something, what we call the cloud worthiness assessment. So we can take the company's data, put it into the system, and compare that, how that would run in a cloud environment. And so in the end, there's something which indicates the potential, and the potential ranges between 1 and 10. And we have real-world cases today where we come to the result that it's close to 1, so even cloud architecture will not bring any benefit to that environment. To give you an idea, typical, very stable, very low fluctuation systems don't benefit from the cloud. We have companies, they have production plans where they can easily tell you what they will produce in August 2016. So, and they produce every day in the same amount, and they have a very stable environment. So the cloud will not really make a big change for them. They know what they are doing each day of the year. So, but not many companies are that way. So there are other companies with a lot of growth, with a lot of fluctuation, with a very uncertain business. So they have the trend to go more to the right-hand side, to the 10 side, where they really will benefit from the cloud. And what we did here is the ranking for Amazon. So with the Cloud Worthiness Index for AWS, as I mentioned that, and it got the little Oscar there for being the first in the list here. So let's go through these steps. The Tco model. There is a Tco model which you can look up on the website of SAP. That's quite easy. I have that here in two pieces. So it has on the first level something like hardware, software investment, implementation, and there is a second level which lays out more in detail. What we have done is we have expanded that model by another 2 levels. The fact is, if you would like to know exactly what you're doing, it's not enough just to be on this first high level and say, okay, I'm thinking about hardware, software investment, and that's it. You really have to boil that down to very specific features there so that you know where things are making a difference. And hardware, software investment, that's the upfront thing before building something. You have the infrastructure, then you have the implementation part. So you are implementing the software. Then you have ongoing cost for hardware and software. So you have to maintain a data center in any way, whether it's AWS, you have your expenses there, or whether you're running things on your own. Then you have application operations. So you're running the application, and you have systems and applications operations in there. And then you have continuous improvement projects. This is the thing which is eating up most of the money these days. And if you compare that a little bit, how was money spread in the past and how is it spread today? When we started our business investigating SAP TCO in 2002, almost half of the money was spent on infrastructure. And only half of the money was going into the application. When we're looking at these figures today, something like 16 to 18% are going into the infrastructure, and the rest is going into people. So people who are running the environment, people who are changing the environment, people who are talking to the users, what they would like to have changed. If you are running a data warehouse system, almost every day there is a request to change things. If you are working in an environment where you have continuously changing business environment, like a telecom, for instance, every day a competitor comes along and has a new idea how to sell you a cell phone service or a line-based service or something like that, and then you have to react. And the reaction always means, but we cannot just do that by changing some parameters. We have to do some new coding. We have to introduce some new business procedures. So there's constant change. And this is what really drives the continuous improvement to be one of the biggest areas of expenses these days. And this is something I would like to draw your attention to. So what is AWS changing here? So it's not making it cheaper to make a change, but it's making it faster to make the change. And it enables people to use more test systems and to have the test systems right when they need it, not holding up a project just for there's not enough hardware for you to test that. You can have more hardware in 2 weeks. So that's not an appropriate answer to a project when you are working on a business process change responding to a competitor. So that's what's important to see here. And upgrade projects are the larger things, the release changes, the big things, which have also been to take into consideration. So when we take that model now and we fill that with numbers, then you see on the right-hand side of this table here the weight. So the weight is what I was talking about in very simple terms. So the hardware and then software investment part is taking 11% of your cost pie. Implementation is 9%, hardware, software, ongoing 12%, applications operations is 32%, continuous improvement projects growing is 20% today, and upgrade is 15%. And the AWS triggered savings, that's what you see in the middle. The ranges comes from the fact that we had this 4 different prototypes in the study. So for each of the prototypes, you have a little bit different way of doing that. I'm not lining that out in all the details here, but this is why we have some ranges here. And you see in continuous improvement project, that makes the biggest difference. The more complex your environment is, the more you save. That's very simple. If you have one ERP system, life is simple. If you have an ERP and a BW and a CRM and an SCM and a portal and a solution manager and, life becomes complicated. And this is, the more complicated your environment is, the more you save by using AWS here. So you see that there are 74% of the pie where AWS doesn't make an impact. So like software licenses and things which are listed down there as well. So business process related work. So AWS doesn't make a difference by finding a common chart of accounts. So this kind of discussion is something you have to go through, whether you have the data center in your basement or whether you're using AWS. But the more astonishing is the fact that even if AWS has only the chance to impact 26% of your cost, in the end, it saves you something between 16 and 22%. So I think that's really a phenomenon. So, and this is simply based on the fact that where Amazon makes a difference, it makes a big difference. So these are the numbers I had on the first chart, like 90% savings in system operations. That's really a big difference. So when you would like to apply that now to your own environment, what we are doing is that we are offering a service, Cloud Worthiness Assessment, and we are producing the Cloud Worthiness Index. So it's not just the fact that in the end you can see such an index which says, well, you will save by the cloud or you will save more or less by the cloud. But definitely you can get all the details about your spending of money in the way that you learn where is the cloud making a difference or where are other internal influences are driving my cost up. And so this is where we're coming to comparisons like, so you are in this bar chart on the right-hand side. So you have TCO as it is in the company. You have as a comparison how it would run if you apply best practices without going to a cloud. Then you have the information, what difference is the cloud making to your current mode of operation, and where could you be if you really apply best practices to all your SAP running operations, including the cloud. So that's the optimal thing you can reach. And this is what we are elaborating based on single SAP landscapes for individual companies. So let me come to some of the takeaways here. I've split the takeaways in three sections. The first is takeaways for IT professionals and IT service providers, since the message is definitely a little bit different. So in order to enable something like self-service for an SAP environment, this is a task the IT department has to take. So self-service for the SAP environment means that the guys in the project have the self-service to say, I need a copy of our FICO system by tomorrow. And self-service means they are just doing that on a portal and they say, I need it, and I need it maybe with a certain reduction in the data, and I need it at that point in time, and this is my cost center where you can charge me for. And that's it. It's not having a meeting with the IT people. It's not having a team setting up for we need more testing and quality assurance systems, and how can we enable that? It's the fact that the IT provides a self-service to the application people so that they can define their infrastructure by themselves. That's a mind-changing thing in IT departments today. That's not easy. It will not come by tomorrow. You will not go home and say, okay, now we are on self-service. So there's work to do for you. But it's the same thinking that Amazon applies to operating system, compute capacity, disk, and 265 services you can have. You have to extend that also to the application service which is given to the company, and then you are providing the same benefits to your users and your customers, your internal customers, as Amazon applies to you as an IT service professional. The most important thing when we're talking about cost, only 1/3 of the savings triggered by the cloud is coming out of cheaper hardware and infrastructure. So the fact that maybe the disk is cheaper on S3 than it is in your data center at home. That's only 1/3. 2/3 of the savings come from the cloud enabling faster, more reliable, easier to use, less laborious self-service procedures and features. So it's very important. If virtualization, I had that very often in the discussion, when we're talking about cloud, then I'm getting the answer, well, we are already virtualized. We have VMware, and so we are done. We have all that. And the next question is, so what did you change in your IT processes? Well, why should we change our IT processes? We are so happy that we have VMware, and we have the good CPU usage and things like that. And the question is, well, how do you set up an SAP system? Well, the same way as before. Yeah, before we had a physical machine, now we have a virtual machine where we are attaching a DVD to, well, we're not using the physical DVD, we are taking an ISO file and we are attaching that and then we are installing. Okay, and then I'll say you have not learned your lesson. The lesson is virtual appliance, the lesson is images, the lesson is not to do the same old boring procedure again, just in a virtualized or cloud-enabled world. So cloud enabling means you have to define your services in order to take 1/3 plus 2/3 of the savings. The service level agreements are going to change. They will define per service. There's a typo in here, sorry for that. They will be defined per service and not per piece of hardware. So that's also very important. You have to rethink these kind of things. In most SAP environments today, I see very poor service level agreements. Most of the time, it's simply the fact, well, something like 80% of all standard transactions have to be faster than 1 second, and we have 99.5% availability of a piece of hardware. And mostly that's it. And bottom line, this is not a service level agreement. This is nothing which really enables you to guarantee to your users what they would like to have. So they would like to have end-to-end availability. They don't care about an application server, a database server. So if any kind of network device fails, they don't care about the fact, yes, the SAP system was running. You couldn't get through to it, but it was running. That's not a response. So we are going to define service levels on the service level. Your financial system will be available. You will be available to take an order, including pricing within 20 minutes from taking the phone call to giving an appropriate document back to the customer requesting. Things like that. That's a service definition. And that's a lot of work for IT people to do. The funny thing about the cloud is that the decision makers in the company, they are mostly coming from a totally different angle. And they are learning what the cloud is, not in the company, they are learning it at home. They are learning it from the kids, from using Dropbox, so from using Skype. So this is what is setting their mind. And then they're coming back to the company. So the most precise thing is always the size of a mailbox. So at home, I have a mailbox which is unlimited. When I'm coming to the company, the first thing I'm getting is your mailbox is full, you have to clean up. What a nonsense. So a highly paid manager is sitting there and trying to clean up the mailbox to free some megabyte of disk space. That's not a very good idea. So, and this brings decision makers into the situation that they are very vulnerable to the idea of getting the cloud their way. And getting the cloud their way means going to, in SAP terms, for instance, going to SuccessFactors, going to Ariba, going to these kind of things. In order to have such a cloud service, you need to have two things. You know what your name is, and you have a valid credit card. And this is what most decision makers on this world permanently have available. So they are going to buy cloud services. And so this is very important. If the IT would like to be in control of what's going on there, IT has to offer that. IT has to be faster than the vendor of another application cloud service out there. Otherwise, they are going to buy that. And it's very funny to me personally, after SAP bought SuccessFactors, how many companies came and said, oh, we had SuccessFactors before. We have not been talking about that. So it was a little bit tricky talking with SAP about the fact that we have also in the HR area another application But now we can talk about it, and it's there. And the second very interesting question where I will never have a good answer to is how many companies have cloud services running in a certain department and the CIO has no clue about it. So this is the recommendation for IT professionals. You have to take the lead here. So if you leave it to the users to make up their cloud decisions, there will be a lot of mess to be cleaned up afterwards. We will need data integration. At any time later on, they will come and say, I have this great cloud application. We cannot get rid of it. So it's in the business process already, but I need that data integrated with our other system. So I have a purchasing system, and in any way, you have to match material master data. So what a great request. So if you're the first, you have a chance to really keep that safe. And well, the last thing here, definitely mastering cloud technologies is something which is good for everybody, since this is something which will be required over the next years. So very easy hit. For the users, the takeaways are a little bit different. So we are talking about IT agility here, and we are taking away an excuse. So users and application people are always saying, I couldn't do it that fast since the IT was too slow, not responsive, couldn't provide all the environments, etc. So we take away an excuse here. So for users, it means that they have to be faster, they have to be more precise in the requirements. If they are using a self-service, it's their decision what they do and what they copy and where they are taking data to, etc. So we are gaining time. So we're gaining time by faster IT, but what does that mean? It's a challenge for the users. They have to map that into faster decisions and to faster projects. So the company doesn't win anything if IT is providing the architecture very fast, and then the project is not capable to digest it and to use it. So, Jesus. So use it. Okay. I'm trying that very slowly. Okay. So buying cloud services for users, I think it's not recommended. I think it's not a good idea. So first moment, it's great. Yeah, I'm autonomous. I don't need these IT jerks anymore. I can buy my own service. But what do you do with all the mess of islands later on, with all these data islands? At any time, you have to go back to your IT and to ask these guys, can you please take that and help me? And it's growing out of my responsibility. So in Europe, we have one discussion which is a very important one. It's not so much a discussion over here about data privacy, data security. So at least the tone is very different. The tone here is, we see down there companies like Crunch Micro and all the others talking about security. AWS is taking that very seriously. But it's more from the perspective, yes, this is something we have to deliver as part of a product. In Europe, we have the situation that in a lot of cases where we're discussing the cloud, it's an excuse. So data privacy means the data is not allowed to leave my house. So the cloud will not work for us, and so since it will not work, we don't have to debate about that. So this is something which we think is very dangerous, and for those of you who are working in international companies, you should know that in Europe we have that problem, and we have to overcome that. My recommendation here is definitely using it as an excuse for not going to the cloud will become very dangerous. The gap will widen. So as we have been seeing here, Amazon is lowering the prices for disk. We have been making the study which I was talking about in May, and now again ready at Thanksgiving. So during that time, Amazon gained 2 percentage points in savings, roughly. So Amazon was lowering prices, everybody else was lowering prices. Amazon is putting pressure on the market, so all the outsourcing guys are running like mad to match these kind of prices. So we have a fierce competition there, and Amazon is gaining in that competition. Again, 2 percentage points. And as this gap widens, at any time, the data privacy discussion will go nuts, and people say, well, we cannot simply afford to talk about it, we are going cloud. I'm proposing definitely to think about these things up front and to find good technical solutions so that everybody can work with that. For the purchasing department, it's the same thing. They have to rethink definitely their strategy. We see a lot of areas where old kind of outsourcing contracts are simply rewritten for the next 2 years, 3 years, since the purchasing department thinks it's the easier way to do. So a new provider, AWS, is for purchasing department a bad provider since they have fixed prices. There's not a lot of negotiation to do. They are used to squeeze and talk and so on, their providers. AWS is not a very good partner from that perspective for a purchasing department. So in the end, they say, well, I would like to stick with the partner I have, and they're promoting things like continuing contracts. That's bad, since if you have another outsourcing contract for another 3 years, what do? You cannot simply then change into the cloud. So this cloud washing is very, very important. For the technical people, it's easier to understand what cloud washing means. For a purchasing department, it's almost impossible. So if a traditional outsourcer comes along and says, we have the cloud too, it's great. The purchasing department is satisfied. Okay, I'm now buying a cloud service. That's what people would like to see me to do. So it's very important for purchasing departments to learn what the difference is between something where you have cloud on the outside and where you have cloud on the inside. The cloud economy is really changing things, like all the way you have been doing contracts. So the purchasing department has to rethink a lot of things in detail. They cannot take their typical contracts they have been using for the last 10 years. They have to make that very different. They have to live with the fact that prices are changing. So the funny thing is, we talk about elasticity is great. We talk about it's great that I can add hardware and pay more and take hardware away and I'm paying less. But this flexibility in terms of being responsible for the administration is bad. A CFO has a problem with changing prices every month. A CFO would like to see budgets. And you cannot see budgets in a cloud world, not fixed budgets. Since you are not capable to say, okay, we have now the 26th of the month and my budget is over at AWS, so I'm stopping all the AWS services since we have no more budget in the pot. That doesn't work. So from that perspective, you have to educate your environment, the controllers, the purchasing department, the CFO, how they can digest variable prices. So variable prices they think is great. Variable prices are a bad thing for a CFO. So the problem is that your application vendor, so a company like SAP, is something which is very difficult to change. So if anybody who's running SAP today is thinking about what it would mean to rip out SAP out of this company, you're talking about something like 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. It will be hard. So definitely you have to check your application vendor strategy and you have to align that. So for SAP and AWS, it's great. For other enterprise applications, it might be not so great. So you have to check where you're going and what you're going to do. That's really important. You have to check what your company is doing regarding CapEx and OpEx. So by definition, it looks like it's great to have no investment and have only running expenditure. For some companies, that's not true. So you have to discuss that with your CFO, whether you think that one or the other is better and how you deal with that. And there are ways to deal with that. So from that perspective, that's possible. And well, it's not only hardware, software we're talking about here, it's also about licenses. So when we're going to the cloud, we see that there's an upcoming debate about licensing models. So the SAP licensing model has been invented for a very stable world of you're purchasing something and the only option is to grow, as I had it for the IBM mainframe. So this is something where we see a lot of discussion coming up and SAP will change and users have to influence SAP and their account managers and have to take any measure really to tell SAP and also tell the other vendors of enterprise apps to change, to provide you with business models which enable you to grow and shrink not only hardware and infrastructure, but also what you're using on top of that. So HANA One, for instance, is a very good example of such a new model. But ERP, BW, CRM, etc. is not available in that price model today. So I think that's definitely very important. So the question is definitely, when you're going home, what is your cloud worthiness index? Where are you? So this is something you have to work on, and maybe I put some helping facts into that presentation. Thank you. I think I made it right in time. The timer says I have 43 seconds left. So if there are any questions here we can take in public, I'm ready to do that. And anyway, I'm available after the talk here for more private discussions. So, oh, well, I cannot talk for SAP. I once worked for SAP, but I can give you the answer. Well, he has not a formal title, but he is something like the CIO of the European Commission. And he gave a very simple answer to that. He said the Patriot Act is a legal act in the United States of America. So if you are putting your data into the United States can act according to the Patriot Act, and it's okay, and we have no problem with that. So that's what the CIO of the European Commission says about that. The other thing is the sentiments. So take us as VMS. We are collecting data out of SAP systems of our customers. So we see what each user is doing. We see what you are selling. We see how your business processes are running, what your financials are doing. So there are companies who are telling us, this is why we are running this 20 terabyte database not on AWS today. If you're putting that into a data center in the US, then there's a legal way for authorities in the US getting access to that data, and we don't want that. And everybody has the right to not wanting something. So from that perspective, this is the reason why we are struggling here a little bit. There will be a session tomorrow where we are sitting here with AWS about what they can do around that situation with data centers, maybe in Germany or whatever could be a solution for that. No questions? No, I think it's really time to move on to the next one. Thank you very much.